This is the West Michigan Sports Show, presented by the United States Air Force. Now, here's your host, Brandon Wirth.
Here we go, another episode of the West Michigan Sports Show presented by the Car Center in Rogers Heights. Brandon Wirth joining you here today, here from the WBRN studios. Thanks for all tuning in, whether you're on 96.5, 107.7 FM, or 1460 AM, as well as all of our streaming friends online at WBRN.com and the WBRN mobile app, which you can find at the Apple App Store, as well as the Google Play Store and much more. And also, got to shout out our post-produced peeps as well on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also WBRN.com. We love you just as much for your support of this show. We got a great one for you today as we wrap up and conclude the winter sports season. We covered boys basketball as well as wrestling state finals this last week. We'll wrap up with the girls' side in CSAA action. And if you want more analysis on the end of this season, or as well all the basketball from this past year, you can go find The Rundown, a great show partner here with the Big Rapids Media Network. Myself, Joe Nagy, breaking down this basketball season and the results and what they entail. You can find it on Big Country 100.9's YouTube channel, which you can search on YouTube online at WWBR Big Country 100.9. All of the episodes from this basketball season, you can watch them on demand right now online there at Big Country 100.9's YouTube channel. And if you need a direct link, you can also go online to the Big Rapids Daily News on social media, including Instagram, X, and Facebook, which if you're not following, make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any of the local news in the Big Rapids area. But you can find all the posts of The Rundown. It was just released on Thursday as you're listening to this on Saturday. So you can go back and find that and give it a listen. It's a very short one this week. Wrapped it up. Put a bow on it, and we look forward to the spring. We also have show announcements for those that enjoy listening to The Rundown. We got expansion coming. So me and Joe gave you just a little sneaky peeky. We'll get you the full details in a published release on Big Rapids Daily News, so you can subscribe to the newsletter so you don't miss out on anything, as well as follow online at WBRN.com so you don't miss out on what's going on with The Rundown. Some pretty cool stuff. If you're a fan of the state sports, all the sports we broadcast, high school sports and more, you are going to be in for a treat. Me and Joe are very excited. We're already scheming up for this project next year, which is unfortunate because we still have an entire spring season to do, which we look forward to bringing you the coverage there. Baseball and softball primarily, for all the other sports, including golf, as well as track and field. Make sure you stay right here and subscribe to the West Michigan Sports Show here to close out this school year and all of our great athletes and great teams here in the CSAA and the local area. But today, obviously, we'll break down the scores. As I mentioned, we'll get those here to you. If you want more, you can go on to The Rundown, as mentioned earlier. To finish out the show, we had some rule changes back in just a year ago, and we got a reaction from myself to what these rule changes did. Were they good? Were they bad? And if there's any more rule changes that we need to establish here in the local high school sports circuit. So we got all of that for you. Be sure to stick around for the second half of the show. But big thanks to all of our great partners with the West Michigan Sports Show. Those include Johnson's Automotive, Schuberg Insurance Agency, Quality Car and Truck Repair, Alter Care Big Rapids, the Mecosta Osceola Career Center, Paris Auto Sales and Service at Big Rapids, and the Mecosta Osceola Transit Authority, as well as, of course, our primary sponsor for this program, our new friends at the Car Center. Thank you for your support here of the West Michigan Sports Show on WBRN. We go into all of our scores from this past week in the CSAA. It was a really tough night on Friday, unfortunately. We had 4 teams go in. Only one made it to the regional opening round. That was Moy Stanwood after beating St. Louis for a District 70 crown, 55-43. Grant Falls to Fremont in District 42 final, 49-40, as well as Ludington defeats Reed City 36-23 in the District 35 final, and Kent City falls to Grand Rapids North Point Christian in the District 74 final there from Kent City. Moy Stanwood would go on to the regional semifinal round, where they would fall to the Mustangs of Sanford Meridian 61-52. So if you want all of the in-depth analysis for the third time, and I promise I won't say it anymore, you can go to the Rundown with myself and Joe, break it all down for you as well. All season coverage you can find there on YouTube. But let's waste no more time and let's get right into it. So MHSAA rule changes from this past year. There are a couple notable ones. We'll kind of go through some of them, as well as the positive or negative repercussions or advancements that they made. And I will give you a couple of the rule changes that we may see very soon, and some that, you can call me biased, that I think should be implemented as soon as we can here in the area of high school sports. So we'll start with one of the most obvious ones. This was probably the biggest news when it came to especially our friends down south at the border, where we had the opening of these MHSAA officials allowing out-of-state teams to play Michigan teams. So teams were now able to play anywhere in the U.S. as long as they were played in the region of the Midwest. So Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or if you're bold enough, you could also go to Ontario in Canada. But I think this was overall, I think this was a very neutral rule change. Obviously, this affects only a certain population, and I can't speak, of course, for a lot of our friends there over on the Huron Lakeshore that might be playing over in Canada, or all of our friends towards more down south that play some out-of-state teams just in the local area and tournament play and so on and so forth. But I think it's a very nice rule change. It allows more flexibility for those teams, and especially for bigger schools down there that might not necessarily have as many bigger schools to play. They don't have to travel 2 hours back inland. They can travel 30 minutes across state lines to play a team that would be more convenient for them. So I think it's overall a solid rule change. I think there's been quite a bit of consideration on what this may open up to be long term, whether that would be setting up circuits where some states have some teams coming over and so on and so forth. It'll be very interesting to follow that, but we won't dive in too far into that, as this is only year one with a lot of these rule changes. So really, a lot of this is just baseline knowledge. So we're just kind of going with it and seeing what the feel is like after year one here in this little rule change analysis. One of the big ones in football was where we saw the football being spotted in penalties. They were previously marked the spot of the foul. This created quite a bit of controversy, and I don't necessarily mean like this was something that was absolutely pled for every single day of the year. We need this change. We need this change. We need this change, because everybody kind of accepted it. That's, this is high school football. You can't commit penalties. And especially for those going to the next level or those looking to make a run in the postseason, you knew you had to adjust to that. But the reality is that there were a lot of times where there would be game situations where an unfortunate call would put a team, instead of being a holding penalty 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, which is what it is now with the previous spot penalty marker for that yardage gain from the penalty, which is where we stand now. It used to be the spot of the foul, which if a team were to have thrown a 35-yard pass, then it would have been a 35-yard penalty, and a team with potentially 16 seconds left could throw a bomb from the 40-yard line to the 5, pass interference call, and now they're on the 5-yard line, and we're talking about them winning the game. Now, what does this do? When you look at the offense, the defense, obviously this rule benefits the defense greatly, right? In a sense, obviously you can make a rule in a case for offense as well, but primarily for defense in these late of games, a penalty in consideration of, like I just mentioned, with a pass interference call or a holding call, where it really favors the defense. And I think that's something that really is an interesting mindset, as our game has certainly started to flow more towards creativity offensively and not necessarily as much defensively as it was in years past, where that was more the focal point. But I think overall, this was a good change. Now, it puts the pressure, not necessarily the pressure, but the consideration for offenses having to go out and win a game. They can't get bailed out by a penalty. So this really benefits the defense in the situations, like I mentioned, late game, where a team has to drive so many yards in so many minutes. But it really now is starting to put the focal point for these penalties on advancing the offense, which obviously that is where we're going, it feels like, when it comes to consideration of offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. People are much more looking at the offensive side of the ball now more than ever, compared to a couple 20, 30 years ago when it was really about defense, where teams try to win 6-0 as opposed to 60-50. So I think that's the where this rule is kind of going. Now, it does help the defense, right? So maybe that will kind of, help these teams more understand that that they need to be better. But if there is a mistake, hey, let's go out and actually try to make the play instead of being too scared with some of these penalties where now it can really put your team with a back against the wall. And it, of course, of all things, I think this really helps eliminate the chance of a bad call truly impacting the outcome of a game. If there's a situation like I mentioned earlier where the ball can be from the 45-yard line with 5 seconds left to the 5-yard line, and that would lead to an end-up score, obviously we can have an argument on if that game should have ended the way it did because of one certain call. This rule now eliminates that because you still have to earn it. Even though the defense may have made a mistake, they'll have another opportunity. If the offense is able to get something, they still have to work for it to get the win. And this goes all regulation, not necessarily just saying late game scenarios, but I think it overall allows more substance within the game, and it won't necessarily be as reliant on trying to draw penalties, trying to do this. It's more focused on the game itself, and it's just a mistake, and then we play on, which I think that's the way that we wanted football, especially to be where we are today. So that's the basis of it, and I think right now, based on where I'm at on my scale, I'm going to put it just above neutral in the positive. I'm going to put it in the positive category so far with these rule changes. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll pay some bills. We'll bring back with more rule changes from across other sports and the reaction after this break here on News Radio, WBRN. Welcome back here to the West Michigan Sports Show, brought to you by our great friends at the Car Center in Rogers Heights. We covered two main rule changes before the break. If you missed out on those, don't worry about it. You can go on WBRN.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can re-catch up on the first two that we covered. Out-of-state competition, how this one was kind of neutral in my eyes and what I thought of it for teams traveling to other Midwest region teams out of state. For high school teams, obviously not as relevant in our area as opposed to down south or over towards the east-west coast. And then the other rule, football, for penalties being a not spot foul anymore, but from the line to gain foul. I think that is certainly one that has probably been more positive than negative so far in its first year of development. We continue on with one in volleyball, and this will be the first one already that I think I'm going to be more on the negative side than neutral side. The rule is that was put in place that teams may now stay on the same bench for the duration of a match unless officials clear or determine that there is a clear advantage on one side of the floor or one bench or one side of the gymnasium or wherever you're playing. In that case, then they will have to exchange after each set. I think that this rule, I think, is okay, but now we have such a gray area when it determines what is a disadvantage. And now you're probably thinking, well, if this is a volleyball court, what's really the disadvantage? The number one thing that comes to mind especially is if you have a gym that is designed to be not necessarily in the same exact formation and not necessarily in the same place as a basketball court, you're going to have, and especially the size of the gym, you have to take in mind, with these basketball goals being raised up into the ceilings, which a lot of these older high schools in this area have. Now, if you have one basketball hoop on one side and you don't have one on the other, that's a clear advantage for one team over another. And that might necessarily not be considered a clear disadvantage by the officiating crew. Now, a good crew would probably point this out because a lot of people in volleyball know that when an attack comes over the net and somebody's able to dig it out, and especially if it's on a rocket, which a lot of these teams have shown, they can hit it with some velocity. That ball is going to recoil, thinking about all of the physics that you learned in high school, and it's going to come straight back up towards the ceiling if it is dug out correctly. Now, if that hits a basketball hoop, now for one team, if another team doesn't have to worry about it, their whole game plan changes. They're going to knock it up in the air. They're not going to have to worry about it. They can reset their scheme. Whereas if it's going to go off the ceiling, you have to prepare a reaction to how you're going to change it. And then now how I have to go back into your scheme with your playbook and run the play. So I think this is one that I think switching the benches, I think would overall create the best thing for the game. And I think that it has to be soccer. You're not playing the same side of the field. The same goes for basketball. I think volleyball, you have to switch. Now, I know it is a pain. Trust me, I've worked with a lot of these volleyball teams, especially at Ferris State. It is a pain for teams to have to move benches. I know it is a pain. But when you're talking about leveling the playing field, creating the most neutral site, obviously you still have home court advantage. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that every game should be treated as an NCAA game or an MHSAA state final game. But when you're talking about disadvantages, advantages in each gym, it's only fair that you have the both side perspective. And obviously if you have to adjust to that, you can adjust to that when you're on your side. You can change your game plan if you're on the other side. But overall, if you make that really the standard, then nobody's going to have these conversations about what's in the gray area as an advantage, what's not. And I think that will help elude it and it will make it as neutral as possible. So I believe that staying on one side would create it would definitely create a less than neutral. Now, if they want to stay on the same bench and you are able to use both sides of the court, sure, that's fine. It might be a little congested trying to make set changes and line changes when you have side outs and all of those sort of stoppages. But let's keep it to the same. And let's have both teams have an opportunity on both sides, especially with the nature of the game and not having to worry about that gray area. Another one that also came in, volleyball coaches. This one I think is really short. I think it's a positive. The coaches can now have a bigger standing zone, which is now a quote unquote from the Huron Daily Tribune, as defined as the libero placement zone extending beyond the end line and the sideline extended. I think this is fair. I think that there was a small coaches box before, and I think it is fair that now they can extend that. So I think that is a good change, and I think volleyball coaches would probably tend to agree with me. I'd love to hear more as well. You can submit as well, WBRN.com, and let me know your thoughts. But I think that's going to be a good change for everybody in that situation. Now, there is one, especially with volleyball as well. During dead ball situations, you now may have an assistant coach that can stand within the coaching zone to provide instruction. I also think this is a thumbs up. I think this is a good positive change. It allows your assistant coach that are working specifics, whether it's offense, defense, special teams with serving and receiving. I think it allows you the ability to have more incentive for assistant coaches, what I think is fantastic. 2 thumbs up from me. I think that's another positive change that goes along with it as well. Another big change when it comes to officiating took place on the soccer pitch. Now, obviously, some people are probably like, what the heck is that? It's called the soccer field. It's called and related to as the pitch for those that play soccer, if those are any confusion. So on the soccer field /pitch /playing surface, officials now have the ability to stop the clock on the board to check on an injured player. Now, that's not necessarily the change that was, obviously, that's not like a groundbreaking change. We were there a couple years ago, far back, when we had to make the change, and I think it's a change for the better. There's no consideration necessarily for stoppage time in that example, because that can be a really gray area depending on what timing system you have. But the biggest thing is now, when the clock is stopped and an injured player can be evaluated on the field, they don't have to leave the match. This is definitely I can see being both ways, and I'll explain the reasoning why. So I'm going to go with neutral as of now because I'm going to tell you why it's positive and it's negative. So previously, back when I was playing a couple years ago, this would have been back before 2020, 2021, whenever there was an injured player, you would have to sub out that player if they needed evaluated on the field for significant injury. Now, the reason why I think this right here, having the ability to keep that player on the field as a positive, is because the nature of the injury might not be that significant. It might just look significant, right? So when you look at somebody's knee getting buckled, a really aggressive slide tackle into the ankle, it's not necessarily a situation where you have to take them off the field. Now, you can certainly have the option to do so, and I encourage coaches especially, and a lot of fans to understand too, that this does not mean they have to stay on the field and that you have to tough it out. If it's a significant injury, you can come off. But when you have to go out and you have to go and evaluate a player, and they just got the wind knocked out of them, for example, or if they just got stepped on an ankle and it hurt for a little bit, and then they walk around and then they're fine, they're ready to go. I think that's totally fine in the sense of, okay, we can keep the game speed going and we don't have to slow it down, worry about the clock stopping, stoppage time, so on and so forth. So I think that's a plus. The negative side of this rule is now you have the potential for what we see in the Premier League, we see in the World Cup, we see a lot of times is where this can be considered a stalling tactic. Now, you're probably thinking, well, they just said you'd stop the clock, so how is it stalling? It is stalling in the sense of you can have players coaching while another team is evaluating for an injury, or even the same team, if you consider that to be stalling. Now, I think when you look at it in a grand scheme of things, we're not going to be looking at this and saying, oh my goodness, this player is injured. I bet they're faking just so they can get a play call in because they're down a goal with 5 minutes to go. Say whatever you want on the situation. Obviously, every situation's in the gray area. Every circumstance is different. We're not going to go judge those one by one. But when it comes down to it, if there's a significant injury and a player continues to play, now you have the question of, was this a considerably serious injury that needed play stopped? And I think that certainly brings up the question mark of it. I don't think this is much a problem as many people think it will be. But I think in the overall grand scheme of things, I think this is a neutral change. I think it's for the better. I don't think it's necessarily improving a ton, besides game management. So maybe a little bit positive over neutral, but it's pretty much in that neutral category both ways, just because of the repercussions that can take place for player safety with injury and health, as well as potential for other teams stalling in that sense, like you see in the professional levels. Not accusing anybody of doing this, but it certainly can be done in that sense with now the time available, with the clock stopped and a player injured that might not necessarily be injured, or injured in air quotes that you guys can't see over this audio medium right now that I'm putting up here in the studio. But I think overall, neutral change. I think it benefits, but it also has drawbacks that we could see down the road. Last one we have here. Appreciate all of you supporting us. Be sure to subscribe for more of the West Michigan Sports Show. The last one stays on the soccer pitch. This is the categories of fouls. I think overall, as much as it will now create a little bit more of a gray area, I think this is a positive change because it clarifies what is defined as a category of foul. And the three categories are careless, reckless, and excessive force. Now, you can probably think and say right now, while those all seem like they could all just intertwine, they can all be kind of a Venn diagram. You'll find some that kind of go in both ways. And now, obviously, the officials are trained to decipher that and what it is going to be on one side over the other. But the three categories are called a careless foul, which is referred to as a common foul that does not result in a booking, or for those unfamiliar with the word booking, a red or yellow card. A reckless foul is considered now a yellow card, and an excessive force foul is considered a red card. So a yellow card is considered kind of a warning of a red card. Now, obviously, you get 2 yellow cards. That equals a red card. That is an automatic disqualification. 1 red card immediately also is disqualification. There's no limit on common fouls, but the more common fouls that a player creates or does will obviously increase their chances of getting a yellow or red card if they continue that behavior in the game. I think this is a positive change just because it helps the clarification with the officials on how to decipher this, because a lot of the language before would be something that kind of meshes all together when they say the term careless or reckless or excessive force, unsportsmanlike. Now they have a really defined, this was a careless foul, but it was not reckless. It was a reckless foul, but it was not excessive. And no, this was excessive. This is automatic disqualification. So a positive there, I think, for the long haul in the sport of soccer. Thank you so much for joining us on the West Michigan Sports Show. Subscribe or tune in next Saturday live, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so you don't miss out on these shows moving forward. But Brandon Wirth signing off here on the West Michigan Sports Show.